Hello, everybody. My name is Renee Conroy, and I'm an associate professor of philosophy at Purdue University Northwest. My areas of specialty are aesthetics and philosophy of art, metaphysics and value theory, and I'm delighted to invite you to think with me for the next few weeks about a topic that actually intersects all of those different fields, and that is the topic of aspiration or personal transformation. So, it's just been the turning of the new year, we've started a new semester, resolutions have been made, plans drawn up, hopes articulated, and we might be thinking, especially as a few weeks have gone by, and maybe some of those resolutions haven't been seen through yet, how do we become who we want to be? Now, fortunately, we can get some really good philosophical help from philosopher Agnes Callard, whose excellent book, Aspiration, The Agency of Becoming, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2018, gets us thinking not about the practical steps toward becoming who we want to be, but what, from a fundamental philosophical perspective, makes it even possible for us to aspire. And what the difference is between those projects in which we engage that are aspirational and those that might simply be ambitious or matters of self-cultivation. So in the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the sort of fundamental moves that Callard makes in trying to explain various aspects of the nature of aspiration and its role in our lives, with a focus specifically on how such personal transformation can be a rational process, what it's like from the inside to experience certain psychological conflicts that are part of major self-transformation, and how we can be held morally responsible for transformations that we effect, given that, from one point of view, we really have become a different person by the end than we started. So in the next 3 weeks, we'll look at those three main topics, but for today, I just want to get us thinking a little bit about what aspiration is and how it might pose some philosophical puzzles for us. So let's start by considering a very basic thought experiment, which is related to those that are often presented by Callard in her book. So we're going to imagine a young woman, and I'm going to call her Joan, who wants to learn to appreciate jazz, but who at the present time has no familiarity with the genre. Or rather, to the extent that she has any familiarity with jazz, it all sounds the same to her, which is to say, it all sounds horrible, like undifferentiated noise. Nonetheless, Joan has this nagging, inchoate sense that there is something of aesthetic value in these musical offerings, even if she currently hates to listen to absolutely all of them. And she desires to access this something of value by transforming herself from a jazz scorner to a jazz enthusiast. So Joan aspires to become something she's not today, a different kind of person. That is, a person who genuinely enjoys and appreciates jazz music. Now, I think from a pragmatic perspective, it's immediately clear what kinds of things Joan might do in pursuit of this goal. For instance, she might find a friend who's very knowledgeable about jazz and who can take her to live performances at the Green Mill or have her listen to Kind of Blue repeatedly and over again, helping her hear things in the music she hadn't heard before, and also helping her understand the norms of this musical form from a technical perspective with a little bit more clarity. Maybe, in fact, she'll one-up that. Maybe she'll decide only to listen to jazz for a year when she goes for walks or drives in the car, giving up all other musical forms just in the hope that full sonic immersion is somehow going to change her ability to discriminate between various tonal sequences or kinds of musical changes. Maybe she'll read books about jazz, its history and its techniques. If she's really, really inspired to aspire, she might even try to learn to play the piano, which she currently plays in a jazz-based style. Now, one thing is worth noting from the beginning, and it might not be something that Joan notes to herself explicitly, but something that does seem to be true. Namely, that even after much industrious study and work, it's possible that Joan will become a jazz lover, but the outcome is not guaranteed. What does seem inevitable is that she'll become more knowledgeable about jazz, that she'll develop a whole new skill set, both in terms of theoretical and practical skills. But it's not guaranteed that her musical values and tastes will actually change. That is, that she'll become a person who is now positively disposed toward jazz music. In fact, I can imagine a possible world in which this experiment of jazz immersion totally backfires. And after a year of working hard to understand jazz better, Joan finds that she hates Miles Davis even more than she did at the beginning. So we should at least acknowledge, from a practical point of view, that Joan's aspirational plan might fail, though not for any lack of trying or sincerity on her part. All of that seems pretty clear. But what's much, much less clear, and quite philosophically puzzling and compelling, is how Joan was able to develop the plan to become a jazz lover in the first place. Much less how she was able to bind herself to this goal, which reflects being a kind of person that she isn't yet. The suggestion that she might do so perhaps sounds a bit incoherent, because of course Joan doesn't presently value jazz music, which means she's not in any position to assess the degree to which it's a good or something worthy of her pursuit. Now, it's really important to keep in mind from the beginning that Joan's aspiration to become a jazz lover, a kind of person, is crucially different from other potentially related jazz-oriented goals she might have. For example, the goal of being knowledgeable about jazz, or being able to listen to it with a discriminating ear, or being able to discuss it astutely with those who are jazz enthusiasts. Because what Joan is not doing is she's not looking to acquire a set of skills that might be used to advance other aims that she already has on the day she makes her resolution. Right? Some of those aims might be things like having deeper relationships with her friends who are jazz lovers, or having her dad appreciate the degree to which she's musically savvy. No, Joan's goal isn't about other aims. Joan's goal is to change herself, from a person who despises jazz to one who enjoys it, and who would therefore pursue it for its own sake, and not for the sake of any other end that also might provide. In other words, as philosophers would typically say, Joan aims to value jazz intrinsically, for itself, as its own good, rather than instrumentally, which is to say, as a tool to some other end. But now the puzzles start coming more quickly and clearly. How can Joan want to value something non-instrumentally that she doesn't yet see, understand, or feel the non-instrumental value of? This, it seems to me, is the first, most pressing question any account of aspiration must address. Since when we aspire to be different in fundamental value-oriented ways, we're aiming to become something that, for the moment, we can only characterize to ourselves really vaguely and inchoately, probably in some sort of terms like, that I know not what yet. But then, it would look like when we engage in aspirational activities, we're sort of at best throwing ourselves in the direction of something we guess to be good or hope to be good, because, of course, at the present time, we can't see or regard it as a good in itself, since coming to that perspective is precisely the point of the aspirational endeavor. But then, adding to that, we might start to be worried that this sort of throwing ourselves into something we don't understand or can't grasp would flout a very basic tenet of practical rationality, namely that we should have sufficiently robust or well-defined reasons for our actions. That's to say, we should be able to answer to ourselves, why? And this is precisely what Joan can't really do yet. She can give lots of reasons for wanting to become a jazz lover in terms of other things she wants, deeper friendships, more understanding of music history. But she can't yet give an answer to herself in terms of the features of jazz itself, valued just for those very features. So, the central question is not how can Joan do it, or is it possible for Joan to do it. We think probably those answers can be answered pragmatically or on the basis of empirical investigation into the world. Instead, the central philosophical question that's going to motivate our puzzlement for the next few weeks is something more like this. Why does Joan do it? And how can it be rationally explicable or internally consistent for Joan to pursue as a non-instrumental end, something she doesn't yet believe or see as good, or something to which she's not yet favorably disposed? Now, Callard's answer to this very challenging question is the subject of next week's slow read post. She offers an account of a special kind of practical rationality that she thinks has been overlooked by most philosophers, and articulates it in terms of what she calls proleptic reasons. But remember, it's often good to begin a slow read of a philosophical text by taking stock of where one is before one reads the text, in part just to get in the mindset that'll be open and creative and careful in terms of thinking about a topic, and in part so we can see how much we may be transformed by reading a text filled with others' slow, careful, and creative ideas. So to end this post, I want to ask you to ponder these questions for yourself. What New Year's resolutions or start of the semester promises did you recently make? If you had any at all, list them out for yourself mentally. Okay, now, how did you come to those? What did that process of coming to commit yourself feel like? What does it feel like to pursue them now that you're maybe a few weeks into that process? Would those resolutions actually count as aspirations? Or are they something more like ambitions? Well, what's the difference between an ambition and an aspiration anyway? Is there an important one that you can think of? And finally, do you think it's possible for a person to aspire to do or become something that is, as a matter of fact, bad? For instance, could I aspire to become a cat torturer or a serial killer? Now, I leave you with those questions in anticipation of our next post on Callard's provocative theory of rationality, thus inviting you to take with me what I think of as the first step of any slow read in philosophy, reflective on one's own pre-reflective intuitions and previously unexamined assumptions. Thanks so much for thinking along with me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.